Eric, this is a monster episode. This is the capstone to our shared existential midlife crisis we've been having.
Yeah, folks, which is sad because that means we're both dying in our 70s. Actually, Omar might be like late 60s.
Yeah.
I'm not going to disclose your age to the audience, but let's just say we are having existential crises a little earlier than most. We're two men in our 30s citing research about how you can still be at your peak in your 50s for like the last 3 duo episodes. It makes you wonder what is going on in our personal lives. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, this is going to be the capstone of the existential crisis tour, folks. We're going to be talking about the philosophy underpinning, well, when do you hit your peak? And is it okay to cash out early? When do you bring your chips to the accountant and say, thank you, sir, you can pay me out? And they say, actually, you've lost $2,000 today. You were in the red. And you go, yep, that's what happens when I gamble, but at least I enjoyed it. That's kind of like the equivalent of cashing out in your 30s with an ACL tear. And that's okay. It happens. But we're going to talk about the nuances and the thought processes and the different epochs, if you will, of a lifter's career, and when it's totally reasonable to make certain choices that others may not make. Why? And when you may be cashing out too early, or at least you should be aware that you could just keep betting on red, baby.
Oh, we're going to keep hope alive here. This isn't, some sort of tenuous blind faith we're trying to peddle to the Iron Cult. We really mean that when we say it. I do want to start, Eric, with 2 things. One, I actually want to read a review because we are talking and we're representative of the cult. So maybe if you're on YouTube, you could drop a comment in the comment section below how old you are, out of curiosity, because we can take a look. I could take a look at the YouTube demographics, and it actually seems that our age range would represent about 40% of the listeners, and then some are older, some are younger. So it's a neat little distribution. It seems pretty representative. What's up, Eric?
Oh, you're calling on me. I had a question. Do you think that looking at the YouTube demographic would be an accurate representation of our overall age bracket? Probably not, huh?
Fantastic. Yeah, I don't know how to use Libsyn. In order to take a look at that back. I shout out to Brandon. We're gonna figure this out. No, it would totally skew it. Totally skew it. Yeah, you're right.
Because I would guess it would skew a little older if we looked at the like our Spotify and at least our iTunes demographics.
Yeah. No, I actually think it's fantastic. This is tangent number 1. Tangent on top of a tangent, actually. But I think it's wonderful. My mom actually is looking to get into podcasts because growing up, there were radio shows. Once again, think about AM radio, which is essentially the forerunner of podcasts. So it's not even this new. I like how sometimes it's a shiny new toy that really has been around for a long period of time, like the concept of podcast, long form.
It's listening. Retro.
Yeah, it's retro chic. It's retro new, bro. But where it's a way of branding it in a sense to get not younger listeners, but not to have that association with something before. Oh, it's a they're new podcasts. I'm like, nah, this is a format that's been around for a while that's basically been revived.
Vintage chic.
Yeah.
If you will.
Yeah, we're hipsters around here. I do want to read, Eric, this is a fantastic review. I'm going to try and read all of it because it is 4 paragraphs. It's a Canadian person called Skeezy Keys, because we talk about iron culture being for all lifters, and we are talking about our own personal crisis and then extrapolating out to the cult. The person is 5 stars, which, hey, right now, you go ahead, leave a rating review, and that's why I'm doing it at the start right here. And this isn't banter. This is actually part of the cult. We're interacting. We're not just a top-down hierarchy. Myself, Eric, or at the top. We're top, most definitely. But we talk with the people. It's not just shouting. It's communication. So let's read this. This is a real review. Person says, I really appreciate Omar and Eric's approach to conversations about science, culture related to lifting. Excellent guests with great insights and approach that really tries to break down biases while still having a clear perspective and idea about history, politics, and power, which isn't something that you necessarily expect from a sciencey lifting podcast. Whew! First paragraph, come on. I'd recommend episode 52 as a first listening about training differences between men and women. When I first listened to this, I was talking about it for days afterwards. The research that they talk about is fascinating. Greg and Sohi get a chance to talk in depth about their research. Eric and Omar both do an excellent job about asking leading questions and giving space to answer. I got to react after every paragraph. Please forgive me.
I'm
Eric.
waiting for the shoe to drop here because normally there's a little something.
I mean, I appreciate the long form review. They said, only criticism is that sometimes the preamble is maybe a bit too esoteric and too long, ? Especially if it's the first episode you listen to and it involves a bit about Danny Lennon being a serial killer. It's very funny now, but was confusing at first. I love it, right? That's honest. I'm all the way in.
That was the shoe that dropped that I expected. And it's a shoe we know is going to drop, and we're going to keep dropping that shoe.
Yeah. As long as there's 2 shoes, because we have 2 feet. I would love to hear trans guests on at some point, not necessarily talking about trans issues or whatever, but talking from a trans perspective about training. It's something we don't get, and I can't think of many other podcasts where it wouldn't be treated as a spectacle. And I actually just want to say to this person, to Skeezy Keys that left that review, that means a lot. I think I could speak for both of us, that you think that, and we would absolutely be down. It's one of those things where, Eric, you've experienced this. It's probably hard being in the fitness industry, trying to amplify certain voices or have some of the conversation. Like, think about when we had Greg and Sohi talk about training differences with men and women, and just the amount of people that we could reach out to talk about these issues, or the amount of research that's been done. It actually is pretty scant.
Yeah. No, I was doing an Instagram live not too long ago on the 3DMJ account, as I do like every 6 weeks or so. Yeah. And I had a question from someone who was specifically asking about training during their transition. Yeah. And how, like the treatment they were going through would impact the outcomes, or if there's anything they could do. And I was woefully unprepared to really give them anything useful. I had to kind of like speculate on my knowledge of things like, TRT and, general hormonal changes and things like that, and the similarities between men and women. So I think it is certainly something where it's hard to get information because it's a very new thing in our society. And while it's not as new as it seems, obviously, the point where we're actually getting information on it and it's becoming a broader discussion point, like, oh, how do we deal with this in sport? That is very new. It's lagged behind the obviously the existence of people, but I think it's something that it's not easy to do. It doesn't mean it's not valuable. And like you said, I am honored to be considered a podcast host who might be able to have that conversation and do it justice. I'll tell you what, my first knee-jerk reaction, being authentic, is I don't know if I would do it justice. Yeah. Like I have blind spots like we all do. And unfortunately, I think this is a blind spot in a lot of fitness. And it means that it's certainly affected me. So I'd want to get the right guests on with the right expertise, but it's certainly something. Like if we're going to claim for all lifters that's that counts, of course, you know. So hell yeah.
No, Eric, I was going to say, this is just me reflecting, and yeah, I'm waxing poetic because it's about us, is that I'm damn proud to do this podcast with you, because I think even though we don't overtly state certain things, I think having an environment that is inclusive and open to the exchange of ideas and just having people able to express themselves, where we speak about that concept, speaking with Sohi and Greg, when we talk about training differences in quotations between men and women, the amount of research, the lack thereof, and we see how the space where some of the voices are, which is, cool, it's reflective of a large portion of the population, but there are other conversations to be had, and even sometimes, let's talk about it just for a second, but that double standard where we see, shout out to the homie Jessica Bittner, right? Where she's on and like, it's seemingly okay for her to get these comments like, you look like a man, or like you're on still. Like the amount of accusations that she gets that she's enhanced compared to a male relatively as strong in their weight class, it's an exponential amount more. So like these are basically the dirty secrets, a lot of dirty secrets in the fitness industry that no one talks about. So to your point, man, yeah, like blind spots, it is something totally that we would be interested in doing, and that is the scope, hopefully, as we continue to expand with this podcast. We're the opposite. Some podcasts, let's be honest, Eric, they're simps for capitalism. And you know what we did? I sent to Eric. This is what I did. I sent to Eric another email. They're trying to get us. We can't say what corporate conglomerate it was, right?
We never signed an NDA, did we?
Can we
just
say
got
it?
respectfully?
Can we say it?
Well,
You want to?
they did request that we not bring it up.
Oh, true.
So
True.
I'm
Okay,
a
so
man
we
of
won't.
honor.
Yeah.
We won't.
All
But
I'll
we got
say-
hit up again, folks.
Eric, so this is what I am once again proud of, is that we don't even make money doing this. We lose money, which means you get to hear two now old people ramble and yell at the clouds. And we get to do that because it's on our own dime. So we talk about exactly what we want, when we want. If you don't like it, there are plenty of other podcasts. And that is basically when we talk about standing our ground and like making a stand for what we want to talk about. That's what it's like. I will say quickly, just to move it along.
Historically, Omar, and you're going to appreciate this, we are staying pirates.
Yeah.
And when big government comes and says, we want you to be privateers, we say, no, sir. And we keep rocking those skull and bones.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Eric's probably the only other person I could do this with, where if we're given a financial there are some people, like I said, simps for capitalism. I'm joking when I say this. If they're like, oh, you can make $1,000 a month. Well, I mean, Omar, you should really consider this. Think about it. The sole purpose of an individual in an economic society is to try and maximize personal wealth. I'm like, slow your roll, buddy. Okay, I see you dancing for those dollar bills in your head. There's more important things here. Okay, like our spiritual soul. I want to talk about this capstone episode, and I do want to open it up because I was vulnerable to Eric. When have I not been? But when I said to you, this is the truth. Most people might be unaware of this, but when we record most podcast episodes, it's immediately after I train because I'm terrible at organizing my training schedule. And as such, I tend to feel discombobulated immediately after training, right? So my cognitive capabilities, I just feel like an overall brain drain. And I brought up to you, Eric, and this is now related because we're going to be talking about Rocky, we're going to be talking about training age and one's path, peaks, all those sorts of things. But I remember in a mass issue of Monthly Applications of Strength Sports, shout out to Mike Zordos, Dr. Mike Zordos, where he was talking about doing something, I believe, cognitively demanding prior to exercising and its effect on exercise performance. And now I'm kind of talking about the inverse, training very hard and then actually trying to do something, a conversation that's stimulating. And I find there's basically a period, I don't know, that's what I was joking with Eric. I was like, so this is an undiagnosed tumor. We're basically about to discover, someone's like a neuroscientist listening,
Yeah.
Eric, and he's like,
Yeah, you don't train hard enough. I think you actually have some type of neurocognitive degeneration going on.
Yeah.
So we should be more concerned than just simply doing a little research review. But
yeah,
I'm sure you're fine.
But Eric's going to cover my weaknesses now. So here's the question, man: Is there any research examining this training strenuously, let's say, and then doing something that is demanding immediately after? So we're talking. It's usually the first 30 minutes. Like basically, if I had a post-workout shake, I sat down maybe for 30, 40 minutes. I'm fine. It's within that window basically because I Uber right over. It's like 10 minutes. Boom, like get the party started. What can you tell me about that? Explain to me, Eric. I'm not going to see a doctor.
No, you shouldn't. They'll probably just try to do something crazy, like give you those poison vaccines. So, yeah, can't have that.
Big government's not going to stop me.
No, See, the issue is not capitalism. It's crony capitalism. It's the government pharma conglomerate that is out there trying to get us all with 5G.
You need small businesses like Tesla, bro.
Small business.
Hey, Eric, sorry. This is, bro, last tangent, I swear. Now,
we're pissing off everybody on all ends of the economic spectrum at this point. Okay, so great question. Interesting research on this. Mike Zordos did review back in, I think, issue 4 in 2020. Not issue 4, sorry, volume 4 in 2020, a study by De Quiros et al. Mental fatigue reduces training volume and resistance exercise, a crossover randomized study. So basically what they did is they had folks, do vertical jumps and sets of squat to failure in a couple different conditions. And in one of them, they had them do it after the Stroop test. So the Stroop test is like one of those things you do when you're bored online where it says, okay, state the color of what you see. And like the word red pops up, but the word red is in blue, and then like, and you have to think really hard. So that was what they did to create the cognitive demand. And they found that after taking the Stroop test, where they throw all these different words at you, and sometimes the correct color that's listed and the incorrect, and it's not about how well you score in this thing, but it's just about trying to get it right. People actually performed a little poorer. They didn't get as much volume. So that's a real thing, that cognitive demand can negatively impact performance. And more recently, Dr. Zerdos reviewed a similar study where they had folks on social media and then train afterwards. And they found they performed a little worse after doing a whole lot of social media stuff. But interestingly, while this might provide short-term negatives, it could actually provide long-term positives. So there's a whole nother line of research called contextual interference. Okay. So the idea is that when you're trying to do motor learning, that you have some type of contextual interference, so a different context of something you're trying to learn. And then for you to be able to then go back to the task you're trying to learn, you have to do harder work and then put it into a deeper, more permanent aspect of your motor memory to be able to perform it. So the example is a study that Dr. Z was actually a part of, published in 2013, called Contextual Interference Effects on the Acquisition of Skill and Strength on the Bench Press. So what they did was they had folks do bench press after getting specific instruction on how to do it, like what's the proper way to perform it, etc. And then they had one group just then go bench press, and another group actually do dart throwing and then bench press. So it's like, here's how you bench press, and I'm going to distract you with dart throwing. But it's not just distraction, because then they have to actually put forth more cognitive effort to go back to what they learned. And this actually has a long-term adaptive effect. So it kind of goes back to that general adaptation model, where the initial stress is also to some degree commensurate with how effective the long-term adaptation is. So two things happen in this, which I think are really interesting. Doing dart throwing immediately before bench press, acutely, just like the other studies I talked about earlier, negatively affects bench press performance. But in the long run, it actually seems to improve motor learning to a faster degree than not doing it. So the idea here is that this can be used strategically to where you go, all right, I'm learning a new skill, or I'm trying to, like this is probably more useful for skilled movement, but hey, it works on bench press. Maybe I read a book, between sets while I'm trying to do, a new performance, like a new movement or something, or I'm trying to change my technique on, moving to sumo or something like that. I'm going to read a book between sets so that I have to then recall it, and therefore, the checklist I'm going through, or the technique I'm trying to use, and therefore put it into more permanent memory. And that's going to negatively affect my performance right now, but maybe I do this on my, say, power day. I'm doing singles at 80% of 1RM. So it doesn't really matter if the bar speed is a little slower today, if what it's helping me do is ingrain a better sumo deadlift long term. And then, it's not for 72 hours that I actually lift heavy, and I'm not going to do it on that day. So that's kind of what Dr. Z talked about and what that study might suggest. But it's cool stuff. So that study, 2013 by Naimo and colleagues, Dr. Z was second author. So that's good stuff to read. Now, to answer your question more directly, Omar, I actually don't know of much research going the other way, but I don't know it outside of the motor learning context, because I would say what we're doing is more like, whatever like improv and recalling scientific facts you have, and reading someone else's emotions. So I guess maybe this is making you more emotionally intelligent and better at improv in the long run, perhaps, but worse for the episode itself.
Right.
So folks, if you think this episode is a little janky, don't worry. Next time, Omar is going to be on his game. Yeah. And I'm sure someone could like objectively quantify the number of like verbal mistakes you make.
Yeah.
And then, correlate it to your training schedule. And we could see that there's this lag effect, so that it's like every other time. And we could do like a time course of positive adaptations from workouts on Omar's podcast performance as a case series. And it could be published in the New England Journal of Medicine or something like that.
Eric, it's one thing to have a casual conversation and another to be talking about pronation angles when you're like, okay, I just did my top set of squats. And I'm just going to come right out and say it, that I get very aroused when I train, right? People talk about arousal levels. And when I'm working up to that top single, there's that extra 3. Eric, you got this too. And this is one of the things I would quantify between people that are about that life and people that maybe not haven't competed in athletics before, but that will to win, where, hey, if the block's getting intense and you got to kind of get in that zone, there is a mental fatigue because I am focusing on this thing, you know, like, and in particular, let's say the squat as an example, where it's a movement, I like doing it. It's something I need to be far more aware of. The bench press, any which way that if I'm, you know, super focused, super not focused, the performance is within 2%, you know, like the bar is going to move, the bar is not going to move on that day, whatever. But there are the deadlift, the squat, and so forth. So I do find it interesting. I'm trying to remember the exact episode. I can't recall it at the moment, but it was a grueling session. It was leading up to that 510 squat, and it was the you know, most concentrated block that week. And we had a podcast, and I just remember like the first 20 minutes, I was pithy with the amount of word, like just my overall contribution, because I was like, I'm just gonna hang back because I just need a moment here, you know.
No, I feel you, man. And yeah, people who are about that life, they know what can go into training sessions. Especially, I think this is when you're in phases where like you're working up to top singles or heavy doubles or triples regularly. Like you have to be on to get under the bar and not to feel like it's going to crush you before you even started to do the movement. Yeah. Or in phases where you're trying to like add reps to even moderate or high rep sets when they're already at like a 9 RPE. Like going from the 11th to 12th rep on something that's really hard, or the 15th, especially on movements where it's pretty painful. Like when you're in a block like that and you got 5 workouts, you basically go through Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the course of that microcycle and the various peaks and valleys. So no, I feel you, man.
Eric, that's a beautiful little 251 right there, jazz progression to get us to the tonic, the topic du jour, which is, you know, we've really been, I don't know what happened in our lives. And I was even shout out to the Nipples, to Joffrey Nipples, where it's like, wow, these guys are really talking about being past their prime, right? Like what happened to them collectively where they just, their emotional center got shattered. And I would say that this was provoked by a few different things. One, I don't know what it's been over the last several episodes, but I've been having a great time. And we both, not only us, they say, the people say, like, shout out to Dr. Ben House, who we're going to be having back on shortly. But he made a post. The amount of story mentions, and I'm not, again, trying to, this is like a self-fulfilling prophecy here, but for the Iron Cult or people sharing or whatnot, it seems like over the last 6 to 8 weeks, people have really been enjoying, or 6 to 12 weeks, really been enjoying the episodes. And I think there's an honesty to some of the questions that we're asking. And I think we would be lying if it doesn't come into your mind at some point, and you don't even have to be 30 to be thinking about these things. Your peak, your potential, where overall you reside on the pantheon. If you're trying to ascend to a certain level, if you're trying to get as strong as possible, as big as possible, is this my limit that I achieved? And you could extend this far beyond just lifting to other aspects of our lives. But we've seen so many situations, Eric, and that's why I want to lean on your personal experience, you in academia, and also coaching for over what now, like 10, 15 years, where I have noted that this question comes up and it's multifaceted, where sometimes for some people, it's not even an age-related consideration. And what I mean when I say that, we spoke about the theoretical, right? Like genetic peak of where if you train perfectly and everything, like this would be the capstone to your career. But for most of us, if we're being honest, whatever, let's say I'm making it up, like the average is like 34 and then a standard deviation, you know, cool, whatever. We won't hit our peak at our actual genetic peak age because we're ascending slowly. And so there's a lot of wiggle room. And for most of us, there's still room to grow. So it's not, there's the two conversations between diving into that unknown when you get into your 40s and 50s and you really are facing those questions of progress, and then you get to the deeper meaning of why am I really doing this. And I think it's a beautiful thing anytime you invest more into any given craft, you uncover further layers. If you're 20, 21 years old and you're just training at first, let's say they're not wrong. Like you spoke about it before in another episode, like more superficial reasons you want to look good because you feel good. That's a very valid. I don't like people to discount those very obvious reasons as being invalid just because they're ubiquitous or seemingly like people are judgmental. Like, oh, you're doing it for yourself. I'm like, buddy, you're lifting this heavy weight for your ego because it makes you feel more virile. Like, do we really need to psychoanalyze any of these things? It's fine. Your journey is your journey. But I was going to say there is that theoretical conversation in the 40s and 50s. I'd say probably at least half of the Iron Cult. They're not at that point yet. But I have seen people, Eric, reach a particular peak. So they've ascended to a certain level. Either it's complacency, it's very complex, the issue. but they never ascend beyond that. And that's not a limitation of their genetics. And it's not, here's something that I think is erroneous. This is the final caveat I want to say, man, before I hear your thoughts. People tend to think they're not getting the feedback they want. So meaning that they've hit a brick wall. So it took them 8 years to hit a 500-pound squat, and now like they're just grinding and like they can't get to the 510. So okay, there's a very real, like, not limit, but you're pushing up against a resistance that feels almost insurmountable. So it's understandable then that they don't want to get beyond that peak. That's sometimes not the case. I have seen people, Eric, do very well, and they're continuing to make progress. But for whatever reason, combination of their passion, their motivation, why they're doing the things they're doing, that they put the foot off the gas pedal, and then it's a slow lessening of what they do in the gym and what their goals are. So we joked about that, where it's like, try to be a bodybuilder, could never look good. So I decided to become a powerlifter, could never become strong. So now I'm lifting for my own, health. And that was a little nebulous. So now I'm describing it as happiness. It's like, how do we even quantify that? It's like, it's like you went from squatting 500 to 315. You went from going 6 days a week to 3 times a week. Work balance is absolutely important, but is this maybe a question of us giving up on our goals, and why? So I want to hear these thoughts, man, because I think it's a very complex conversation.
So much to say, Omar, and I think that's a great preamble. There's like 3 pathways we could go down. One of them I think we can shore up quickly, and that's because we talked about in a previous episode, is people hitting their peak when they're not at their peak. And if you go back and you listen to our episode, You Don't Understand Genetic Limits, I think we talked about it there. And really the synthesis of that episode is that most people, when they hit their limit, which isn't really their limit, the best they'll ever be are nowhere near the best they'll ever be.
Yeah.
Most people concerned, like, you have to ask the question, like, why are you concerned with a genetic limit if you were really doing everything in your power to get to your peak? You would just keep pushing. Like, it's the implicit question. It begs the question, if you will. You want to know when you can take your foot off the gas. You're frustrated by the process of working this hard and not being seen as something you're comparing yourself to. And this is like the potentially some truth, but I don't really buy it kind of reason why we need to do these natty or not witch hunts, because these people are giving us false hopes, and I'm pushing really hard and I'm so frustrated that I can't get to that. But like, long before there was anabolic steroids, people were not looking like the best in the world. That's just the way genetics are, so I never really bought that. And I think it comes down to, what are the barriers that prevent someone from continually pushing to get to the best they can be, and simply being content to look up one day and go, it's been 5 years, I'm doing everything in my power to get better that I'm aware of, and I'm not getting better. Maybe I am at my peak, or I'm on the other side of it, or I'm at a plateau that's near the top, versus 15 years before that, going on Reddit and trying to ask, like, am I at my peak yet? Or when will I get my peak? Or is this guy natty? Or et cetera, et cetera. So that whole mentality, it hinges upon, what is the current motivating factor and how sustainable is it? Something we've talked about endlessly on Iron Culture. And I think, there's multiple ways to frame the same thing, and it's easy to frame it negatively. And I understand people listen to us and we talk about being a lifer, and it almost seems like anyone who starts lifting and then stops lifting, or maybe even doesn't keep lifting with the same level of passion, virility, and effort, like we were talking about the microcycle looking like the progression of Rocky. Like, if you're like, that's not always me, Eric, does that mean I'm not part of the cult? No, you are part of the cult, 100%. And I think, and even if you were someone who really is only down to like lifting once a week at this point, and just actually are lifting for health or happiness, and because it's just not worth it what you used to do, you're still part of the cult. So Omar, you talked about, I tried to be a bodybuilder, it didn't look good, didn't have the genetics for it, maybe. Tried to be strong, all I got was achy hips and maybe 10 pounds on my bench. So now I lift for health or happiness, right? That can be framed in the way of, yeah, you're just constantly compromising on your goals, and you're really good at rationalizing this downward trajectory and the fact that you're terrible. I think a better way to look at that is, maybe that's adaptive. Maybe that is exactly what someone needs to do. We've talked many times about how lifters can stay in the game by making lateral shifts. I'm feeling really frustrated, beat up, maybe even got an injury, and I'm plateaued in powerlifting. So instead, I'm going to try Olympic lifting for a while. Oh, I've reignited that fire. I'm going for it. Yes, Armchair Lifter on the forums. I just dated myself. On Instagram, that's what the kids are on.
On the TikTok.
On the TikTok. You get these emails. All right. So anyway, armchair lifters are going, yeah, that's not optimal if you just stayed in it or hired a coach or what have you. Like, oh, you're shifting to Olympic lifting because you can't accept the fact that you're struggling, right? And maybe you're right, and maybe it's not bad. You know, maybe that person is making a lateral shift so they can stay in the game, because we are not masters of our own motivation at all times. It is something that is heavily influenced by our environment, our experiences, and just the shit that happens sometimes in the gym or outside of the gym. You know, you might be on your shit and your wife dies in a plane crash. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just the most horrible thing that could pop in my head right now. Yeah. And like, yeah, you take a couple of years off lifting, and then when you get back into it, you can't reignite that same fire. So you have to do something different. We don't have perfect control over our psychology, or we wouldn't have psychologists. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that, one, most people top out far below their peak, because to get to a peak requires a kind of dedication and consistency that is typically only bred in competitive environments or with certain personalities. You know, people who are willing to, despite the fact that they don't have necessarily an external goal motivating them, like winning a title or reaching a certain level, et cetera, which I think is probably one of the most important factors for hitting your peak when you're actually competing in sports. But for those who aren't, like for you, Omar, you have a specific personality, drive, and motivating factors that make you want to keep trying to, you know what, I want to hit 250 overhead press. You know, one day I do want to try to hit a 405 bench. Okay, I want to squat 500, maybe actually hit depth, you know, like these kind of goals you have, you know, like crazy stuff, right? I want to deadlift 600 pounds. I want to deadlift 600 pounds, not in a Power Ranger outfit. Like you're able to keep it spicy. And I think that's not common. Most people plateau at the late stage novice or early stage intermediate phase, because that's where most people who don't have like perfect genetics just to keep making progress, which I do think is a component to this. Like we do see a lot of people who maybe aren't even on gear and they just train hard and they get to, and like first you can go like, they're not at their peak. They're just genetically elite. So their intermediate is my advanced. Well, if you actually look at their career, some people just train hard and they keep progressing for 2 decades, you know, and good for them. But for most people, you have to really start scratching your head and being a little more savvy and doing things more intelligently and thinking about how to customize. You have to pay attention. You have to write down your workouts. You don't even need a scientific approach. I'm not going to be the evidence-based guy who says, look, you can never hit your peak unless you're reading research. You do need to pay attention to yourself, experiment, and have some rational thought and make decisions. You can't just follow a split that's out there online and for most people, make it to your peak or even close to it. And I don't know that the difference between a late stage novice or early stage intermediate and advanced level lifter is worth it for most people with the level of effort they have to put forth. Like, let's objectively talk about, like, what benefits do you get from getting 80% of your gains as an early stage intermediate to 99% as someone who's heading towards that asymptote? Health, no difference. In fact, you're probably a little more likely to have a couple banged up injuries, you know, because you're pushing so hard and trying to make those 1RMs happen. Muscle size, you get all of the health benefits that you would get from just getting your fat-free mass index up to like 22, you know, what some people just walk around with just from the gravity of the earth pulling on them as they walk around if they have decent genetics. Maintaining a decently low body fat, really no different than simply being in the overweight category. It's not until we see like a BMI of 30 or higher on average do we start to see negative effects for being overweight. And most people who regularly work out and have been for years and are hanging around that late stage, you know, novice, early stage intermediate phase are probably not actually in that classification of obesity. They might have a BMI of 30, but I guarantee you their body fat is lower than that, and it's more due to how much muscle mass they're carrying. So from a health perspective, not a whole lot more. Also, let's be honest, from the happiness perspective, nobody got happy from getting abs. You know, some people did get happy in the time course of it because they went from a place in their life where they did not have agency, self-belief, self-efficacy, or purpose. And then through developing those qualities, they were able to have the agency to really change their body, and they found a new passion project, and they one day they look up and they go, wow, I can't believe all the progress I've made. But the happiness came from their ability to have that agency, to be able to set a goal and achieve it, right? Not from just the specifics of what their body looked like, okay? I think if we're all honest, we can see that's the truth. And there is a certain amount of satisfaction and pleasure one gets from improving. Don't get me wrong. And I think it's that continual progress that does it. But that's not an end point. That's more of the journey and being in it. And that's what we're talking about. How do we keep ourselves in it? Because that's really what makes you happy. Like, it's not you feeling shitty about yourself when the armchair critic says, yeah, you used to squat 300 kilos and now you're trying to get your snatch up to 90 kilos and your squat's just falling. Yeah, they're disappointed in you, but you're having the time of your life. You're having a newbie phase again, hitting PRs in the gym as an Olympic lifter, learning a new skill, having a new mountain to climb, even if it's a hill that's only 1/4 the height of the powerlifting hill you climbed. You know what I'm saying? And again, that means that you found a way to keep the journey going, and you're still getting all of those objective health benefits. You're happy, all the good stuff, you're finding meaning. So is that so bad? So I kind of think, that's what we're talking about, is there's really nothing wrong if that's your jam to go, I'm happy being an early stage intermediate. I don't want to put forth, it is not worth it to me. But that's not for everybody. I think there's just as many people, and probably most of them listen to the cult, like myself, who go, I really want to see what's the furthest I can take this. Like that's the game for me. That's the dopamine drip. That is the completionist in me, if you will, if we want to talk about, a video game perspective. I want to know, what can I max out in this Helm structure? How far can I push my strength? How far can I push my physique? And that's interestingly intertwined with, I like acknowledgement. I am a competitor. I do want to see, how high I can place, and that affects things. So I find it easier to stay motivated in my bodybuilding pursuits because I know when I actually compete in bodybuilding, I do better than when I compete in powerlifting. Even though I'm not at my peak, I've had to push very hard, but I'm still making progress in powerlifting. But I find it harder to keep myself motivated training strictly for strength because of the interaction effect. Even though I say I don't care about it, it's not my underlying philosophy. I'm still a human being affected by it, knowing that, hey, my total is good 4 weight classes below me. Currently, I am very mediocre, but I'm improving, so I should be happy, right? Well, I'm certainly, I probably would have given up a long time ago if I didn't have that philosophy, and I wouldn't even be as strong as I am. But let's be honest, of course, I'm impacted by my relative comparison to the field in the two different disciplines. And I'm more drawn to the one where I do better compared to the average person rather than the one where I'm more like the average person. And I think that's normal.
Eric, the last 5 minutes were a mic drop moment where there's a few things, my dude, I definitely want to go over. I now remember, by the way, Ben House, if we had the Iron Cult throwing up quotes from episodes, that certainly would be one of them, that nobody ever got happy attaining abs, where Ben House, I believe, basically paraphrasing what you said, identifying a problem isn't the same as solving it, which, that's an aphorism, right? That's something to unpack. I think that's brilliant. I do want to talk very briefly just about what you said when it comes to either abs or attaining some of these goals, because I completely agree with you. The perpetual process of self-improvement, that the idea more is the goal, right? And it could manifest itself in a variety of different ways. But let's think about this, and I do want to talk about social media for just a small second. If you remove the reasons why people are promoting certain things, it would immediately reveal the aim behind what they're talking about. So let's think about these common, simple narratives that you see in marketing. Like, if you attain the abs, you'll be happy, right? Like, these things that essentially to beginners or to the impressionable, they seem true on the surface. So you're not happy. So here's the problem. It's marketing, right? Eclipsing everything. And that's why I'm proud of, this is the joke, but not the joke about Iron Cult, is that there's nothing to promote here. We're just speaking our honest, experiential truths that we've uncovered throughout time. And some things you do have to live the damn life, so to speak, where we've been on our own journey, Eric, over the last decade. And these aren't things that we just, these epiphanies, legit, year or two, oh my, this is the real meaning of training. You have to go through the crucible, so to speak. So I'm proud that both of us, it's that perpetual reflection upon yourself, your experience, being self-aware enough to then try and describe it and then interpret it and be introspective and all those other things. But I would just caution everyone listening to always just question some of the intention behind some of the things you see online, where even when you refer to, Eric, like the abs idea, like if you got a six pack, you'd be so much happier. It's like, here's a problem. You're unhappy now. True or not true? It's like most people probably are pretty unhappy. It's like, that's true. It's like this guy in this commercial seems pretty happy, doesn't it? Like, here's a sunny smile. Here's like, you know, the glossy sheen. Like, here's the car, the this, the that. You would be so much better if you were like them. You got that major FOMO. And when you start thinking about the marketing reasons behind certain narratives being driven, and you even see this, like, there is nothing wrong. I think it's beautiful, the agency that one attains for themselves and their sense of identity, getting stronger, feeling more capable, all those other things. But they kind of become, in sly ways, weaponized, you know what I mean, used as marketing tools. And then really when you think about it, it's like you're not really having the full conversation. And I just wanted to say that before continuing. I wanted to say, Eric, that for me, the way I kind of interpret training in general is almost kind of like genres of music, in the sense like what your goal is, where I don't know if it's the idea of being hypocritical in our society is seen as being something negative, or switching, like, oh, you're not someone who's like steadfast, like you're a powerlifter, like that's your identity, or like, you know, bodybuilder, even when you're speaking about for yourself, where it's like, you know, you do bodybuilding and powerlifting, you've done that since basically the inception of your training. But if you don't plant your flag in one area, so that person, I could think of three people immediately as soon as you said someone used to squat big, and then all of a sudden for them, like maybe that hill to climb up to from 300 kg, so 660 pounds and change, all the way up to like 310 is something they don't want to do, or it's the juice ain't worth the squeeze, right? That they rather do Olympic lifting. So there's a new complexity they have to understand, a mastery of a sport that's new. There's different demands, I should say, placed upon them. So new skill acquisitions keeps it fresh. And to an outsider who is then trying to tell you how to feel about your own journey, it's like, well, that's weak. Like, weren't you a lot stronger before? It's like, that's their own subjective experience. It's outside of your own personal opinion of what they're going through. And like, people have a hard time, I think, understanding that. But I can't help but feel that lifting, if you're a lifer, is kind of like genres of music, where some people like, they plan to like, I like pop, I like rock, I like rap, I like hip hop. And that is why the supremacy I'm going to talk about here. That's why I love me some jazz, because you know what? Wayne Shorter, to quote him, one of the best saxophone players of all time, when he was asked to describe what is jazz, he said, I dare you. Like, it's basically what it is. Like, there's no rule. It's the most open-ended. So anything can be within that genre. And I say that in the sense that we all have a time and place. I was thinking recently, so to get stronger, I'll just share this very quickly about myself before we continue. But to get stronger requires a certain drive, a certain dedication, and different considerations, I would say, than pursuing hypertrophy. Or certainly, Eric, I could see that. Like, people joke, like pickup games of like bodybuilding. There's a difference between doing your 3x10 and like somewhat tracking your macros and actually dieting down for a show. So let's make that distinction when people bring the catch-all where they say like, oh, like I find bodybuilding easier. Like, even Jess was joking about that where she brought it up. It was like me. It's like, it's a fail. Like, we did a failed bulk and we got like, kind of, it's like, that's not the same. That's level 3 out of like 12 levels, and each level it's a magnitude harder, right? So let's not discount that. But I do think there's different demands depending upon your goal. You just brought up weightlifting, and I can't help but feel, depending upon what's going on outside of my lifting, influences heavily how I choose to do what I choose to do with my lifting. I can't help but think, Eric, with yourself pursuing the PhD recent, like, there's a period of time where you didn't compete. Like, it not that it was nonsensical, but if you want to dedicate yourself wholly to the pursuit of something, and you like the idea of excelling, which I think is a very noble pursuit, and you feel you can't do that, and I actually detest people's like, well, it's like, maybe if you're more hardcore, Eric, you could, like, anything's possible. I'm like, no, this isn't only sounding naive. This is just sounding dumb. Like, where you don't have this lived experience of what, like 70, 80 hour work weeks on top of like trying to die down. I could theoretically do this, but do you think the outcome would be my best possible self? Like, why am I suffering needlessly? I make the joke that often some of my choices would be how to make any goal the easiest possible, and then how to tackle then a harder and harder goal. So I don't want the goal to be hard. I want to find a goal. I want to develop a goal, and then have the path of least resistance so that I could tackle bigger goals. It doesn't make sense to me to suddenly have like, let me wear this on my back. Like, let me just make the suffering more intense. I'm like, no, I actually want to, like, I want to achieve this. Like, that's the goal is the goal, right? Not like me feeling bad about myself and putting myself through hell. But I was going to say,
That's like the process of building momentum in a block.
Yeah.
You know, so you start with low maxes under your training max is what we, often call it. And then like your first of 8 weeks, you're hitting these singles or doubles or triples or fives, whatever your like heaviest set is, at something that is probably like a 5 or a 6 RPE. And it builds that confidence. And each week you can add load to the bar. And I think there's not some physiological magic that happens from that. But there is, I mean, don't get me wrong, there is progressive overload there and a sufficient adaptation in the first week, so you're not starting too light that you actually just maintain or don't get any stronger. You're finding that sweet spot of getting enough of a dose, but still being able to progress without burning out in that first week. But I think more importantly, psychologically, you prime yourself for going, yeah, I can add weight to the bar. I can do this. Versus if you start too heavy in that first week and you barely grind out that triple, how are you going to feel getting under the triple with 5 kilos more next week when you try to follow that progression plan? You're going to be scared shitless.
Yeah.
So I think a huge part of that process of quote unquote building momentum is achieving goals that allow you to think that you can achieve the next goal and perceiving an increasing difficulty as being a little more flat. So it is objectively harder each week. The RPE is going up, the load is going up, but you're matching those demands with increased self-efficacy and expectations for yourself so that it doesn't feel as hard, even though it is. So anyway, that's just a little aside. This is something we do all throughout life. And it is literally the process of how self-efficacy is built, which transcends the weight room, but you get a little microcosm of it there.
No, Eric, well put, man. Because here was going to be my question to you to open up now this conversation is everyone is on their own journey, just in life in general. And I do think it's hilarious to me when someone's sole career, and I lump myself into this, is talking about fitness and they don't understand that their availability to do what they like, it is their job, which puts another sort of pressure, no doubt about it. But it's like, think about it. You could get up whenever you want. You could train whenever you want. Like, you don't have a family, you don't have children, you don't have all these things. Like, you don't have like maybe even like financial concerns. So let's talk about like the person, like I'm joking when I say this, but let's talk about like the CEO fitness mogul talking about like people are lazy. Like I get up at 5 a.m. It's like, man, when you do it of your own volition and not because you have to do it in order to support your family because you have a crumbling, like, financial insecurity that's, just all around you and other people, like things outside of your control, it's a lot easier to do those things. So there is a separation. That's what I want to say with the cult between sometimes the talking head, so to speak, and their very real reality of what they're going through. Like either were you like for yourself, Eric, like grad school or other problems, like we joke and talk about the biopsychosocial model, like as it relates to pain, but also just what they tackle when. And I want to open up this question. The question for you is navigating some of the listeners through this lost woods in the sense that when you first start lifting, everything works. You reach the intermediate phase where things start slowing down, you make some adaptations, you start reflecting on your journey, you start pivoting, you continue to make progress, but most people end up in that situation where they start questioning, is it the peak? Why am I doing this? They start having some of these existential questions, and this can happen several times, right? You might have it, so one of the first times I had like the come to Jesus conversation for sure was when I first injured my back, right? Like in 2015. Where everything, like I was just getting stronger. And then I had an injury, an acute injury. I try to overcome it and then it would keep re-aggravating itself. So it wasn't the simple process of, like, okay, get back on it, start slow. It's like, nope, it happened again. Okay, I got to like deload back to the bar. And after like the 4th or 5th time, you're like, what is really going on here? But for people that are lost in the woods right now, trying to sort out why they do what they do in the gym, questioning, where they are and what their potential holds. What are, from a coaching position, what are maybe some of the questions they need to ask themselves? What are some of the considerations they need to figure out? And then what is potentially a path forward? Because not all paths are going to be, I'm not saying like, hey, Eric, like you're lost in the woods. Like, how do you emerge victorious out of it and you reach the peak that you never reached before? It's like, that might not be the situation for you. And I'm not trying to be negative when I say that, but like everyone has a different path. But what are the questions to then frame their experience and then what they do maybe moving forward?
That's a great question. Yeah. And I think it all comes down to when you're in that position, when your self-belief is shaken because you're plateaued, that is really the key element that we need to address. When you hit a plateau and you're not sure you can progress, the plateau isn't the problem. It's that you're not sure you can progress. And this actually goes back to those talking heads. You know, the people who are, their whole life is fitness, and they seem to have lost some perspective, and they're kind of shouting at everyone that if they just took some agency and did it, it would work out. And the reason why I say is they've got it backwards is they're forgetting how they got the agency. Like I said, the gym is a microcosm of life. It is literally like training mode. It's not as hard once you're actually in the gym. And the beauty of the fact that the first couple of years when you're in there, as long as you have some semblance of an intelligent approach, or just a reasonable approach, I would even say, you're going to make progress and you're going to get this building of self-efficacy. That's what allows the people later on, when they become the talking head and they make fitness their lifestyle, the fact that they've kept stacking these bricks up, the self-efficacy is on top of that tower at the end. And now they look out and they're not able to understand why people at different points in their journey or with different challenges or not at that level yet don't have the ability to just get up and do it. And it's partially, yes, that they've now engineered their life to make it easier. But the reason why they were able to engineer their life is because they had self-efficacy. And yelling at people who don't yet have self-efficacy to have self-efficacy, not very useful, unsurprisingly. So I think that's why it's backwards. They're forgetting, they think that they have found out that they have control over their lives to just make decisions and do things. They're forgetting that the way that they developed that perspective is through building self-efficacy, and that is the result of it. They're yelling at someone who doesn't even know what the equation yet is, what the answer is. Not helpful. So they're saying, it's 13. And I'm like, well, yeah, I don't even know, am I solving for X or Y? It's 13, asshole. You know, like that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So essentially, like that is what we're seeing. So for people who are in a position where they are plateaued, they are stalled, and they're asking the question of what do I do? And when I say stalled and plateaued, I don't mean they've been stuck on 225 for a few weeks. I mean, like you, they are asking one of those hard questions of how do I stay in this? I'm finding a lull in motivation. I can't get myself in the gym. I'm not 100% sure why I'm doing this. That is the question you need to ask is, okay, well, why are you doing this? Why do you want to be doing this? How long do you want to be doing this? And what are you hoping to get out of it? And a lot of the times, those questions actually have not been asked previously, or they haven't been examined. And I think it's easy to take pot shots at marketing and capitalism sometimes, but we also forget that marketing doesn't pull at strings that don't exist. They're pulling at strings that do exist. And even without the presence of any of social media, and trust me, if you looked at fitness marketing from way back in the day when it was, you had to basically opt in to get those heartstrings pulled, you know, and you'd have to decide to flip to certain pages. Yeah, I mean, even in the 2000s and 90s when there was not social media, you couldn't escape the ads. They were like, they had articles that were actually ads pretending to be articles.
Yeah.
But if we go back to like the 50s, 60s, 70s, there was mostly articles. And yeah, some of them were, you know, written by the magazine owners who were trying to get you to buy their stuff. But like the sand kicked in the face stuff, like the narratives really haven't changed, but you really did have to opt in to see them. And people still were able to create a large fitness economy off of this much less efficient exposure in frequency and in magnitude and in savviness of the same heartstrings, because those heartstrings are so easy to pull because they're a normal part of being a human. We are trying to find meaning. We are trying to be accepted by our peers. We are trying to overcome perceived self-doubts. So when you're in one of these positions, you know, it's sure, yeah, you're going to be more victim to this stuff, but you have to ask yourself, why am I a victim to this stuff, and not just blame it on the marketing. And I'm not saying you were doing that, Omar, by any means, but it certainly is another thing to consider. And I think what I'm getting at is that you have to make sure that your motivation to be in the gym and be part of the iron game is something that will sustain you for the long haul. But to know that, you have to actually go, well, hold on, do I want to be in this for the long haul? And I think that's a question most people just simply haven't asked. So I think ask yourself, do I want to be lifting in my 60s? You know? And I think we'll go back to the video game analogy, because I think a lot of people think in those terms. You know, like when you unlock achievements in a game, let's say you're playing, I don't know, like Prince of Persia or something like that. That character can always jump the same distance and grab onto a ledge 100% of the time. Sure, you think, oh, in his backstory, he's got this training and he's got these skills, and there's some element of this character that allows him to be this athletic. But you could open that game and just watch him sit there, you know, and you could have a year go by with that console still running. He wouldn't atrophy. He wouldn't go to sleep. He wouldn't lose any jump height. So he always has the inherent physical skills. And if we think of fitness in Prince of Persia as, oh, I'm unlocking the achievements of being able to do these tasks, that's kind of how people think of, oh, I want to squat 500, I want to squat 600. But not everyone thinks of it like that. I would say, Omar, you kind of think of it as like, I want to be ready to go, to throw down, to do anything. I think you still have like a strength bias, but some of the people I talk to who are more in the CrossFit community or who are interested in kind of like some of the stuff that special forces people do, they're less interested in what their peak strength is or their fastest 40. I think most team sport athletes have this perspective. Like sure, we have these objective goals we're trying to get to in the S&C time, but what I really want to be able to do is drive the Lambo I've created. Yeah, and it's going to be at different times, a little more functional. I need to get an oil change, or you know, when my tires are a little flat. But I want to be able to perform at any given time. And when it comes time, I want to be able to adapt to the circumstances that are in front of me. When they cut right, I want to be able to spot it and go with them and play good defense. I want to be able to jump high. I want to be able to run any pass. I want to be able to make decisions in the moment. So I think there's a lot of people who are into what looks a little more ADHD to the average powerlifter or bodybuilder in terms of their fitness, is they want to be able to have the lived experience of being in a fit body with multiple capacities. Basically, they want to be the Prince of Persia guy. They want to always be able to jump.
I want to be harder to kill, brother.
Exactly. Or other variations of that. Like, I think that's one of the trophy versions, but I think it's 100%. A very reasonable approach. And I think a lot of people who look at these achievements unlocked, like I've squatted 500 and now I lose a whole lot of motivation to keep squatting. It doesn't really bother me, at least right now, if I'm now down to 400, because I have the video evidence. I did squat 500. I know it happened. I put in the work. I got there. And some people would really not be motivated by that, you know? And I think if we think about, you know, the guy who says, I used to bench 400 in high school, we like, you know, we make fun of that, but some of us have that same mentality, right? And we think, you know, when that dude comes up, we go, yeah, even if you did, like now you can barely get out of a chair without groaning, like not impressed. But we don't think about, oh, I'm chasing numbers right now, and once I hit them, you know, I kind of lose motivation. Why is that? Clearly, you don't actually fully value that if you're rolling your eyes at Chad, you know, the 50-year-old ex-football captain, you know. So I think you need to look at, what am I really doing here? You know, is it just to get stronger numbers? And maybe it is right now, and that's okay. Like if your current focus and your current motivation and your current capacities are all aligned, so you're in a phase where you can make measurable progress consistently, you're getting stronger, you're motivated by being stronger, and that makes you happy, it's all good. But just be aware that things change, nothing stays the same. So what is the process that you're going to have to stay motivated when you get to a point when progress comes a lot slower? Well, you've got some options. You can go all in on the science and become like a knowledge junkie, you know? And in some ways, making a 10-pound increase in your bench over 2 years is even more satisfying than when you added 100 pounds in 6 months when you first started training, because you know what you had to do. You had to learn how to read exercise science textbooks. You decided to work with a coach and have a relationship with them and try all these different programs, trial and error, track everything in Excel. You know, you started tracking your macros. You leveled up and you put forth more effort and you got something out of it. You're going to be more attached to those 10 pounds than you were, or those 20 pounds than you were to those 100 pounds. But maybe you don't have the time for that. Maybe you don't have the money for that. Maybe you never liked that aspect of lifting. You're the person who always hated the science-y fitness stuff. You're not listening to this podcast, obviously that's you, but fair enough. What other pathways are there? Well, I'm going to make a lateral shift, and that's totally okay too. I'm going to start doing CrossFit. I'm going to find other ways to improve. So I think it's okay to be an improvement junkie. You just have to be aware that there are other ways to stay invested. And if you are answering the question of, do I want to be in this for the long haul? Improvement can't be the only juice. Now, the thing is improvement is actually a pretty good fuel grade. You know, if we're talking about, you know, like fuel quality, it's definitely higher than being stronger, bigger, or better than other people or seeking the approval of others. And I think that's where a lot of people start. And you said earlier, like, oh, we love to belittle that, but it's such a common and normal human desire, you know? Like, who in high school doesn't want to be popular? You know, and it's only like till junior or senior year where certain kids realize like, I've been chasing this the whole time and it hasn't made me happier and I'm never going to be popular, so screw the popular kids. But trust me, if they had gotten popular, they would be all about it, you know? So, you know, approval seeking is totally normal. Trying to be better than others is totally normal. Having that as a life philosophy, probably not a good idea. Having that sustained for multiple years, also probably not a good idea. It's not quite the same as a competitive external goal, because it's not just about beating others, but it's about, you know, testing your mettle against other people who are also trying to be their best. So I think that's kind of almost like the arena for people who are improvement junkies when you think about competitive desires. It's not about beating other people necessarily. It is more for some than others. But most competitors who compete at a high level, they want their opponents to be at their best. They want the tide to rise all ships, because they want to see if they've got what it takes to come out on top, you know? So anyway, I think it starts, you know, potentially as this just acknowledgement, comparison, social status. You move away from that and you think you've hit, you know, the grass being greener on the other side, but the grass is kind of pale green compared to just like dead trees, you know, like dead trees and just a wasteland is the social comparisons. You got to get out of there as soon as possible. Improvement. Okay, we've actually got some growing grass, but it's not well watered, because as soon as you get an injury or as soon as anything stops you from improving, you are at risk. So there are other paths. You know, I think one thing to give a shout out to the people who I want to be hard to kill, bro, like they get enjoyment from the process of training. They're in it during the moment. They are enjoying the fact that I can do this workout. It doesn't really matter that much if my jump height today is not quite what it was, or I couldn't get quite as much density in this WOD or what have you, or get as many reps, but I'm fit. I enjoy driving the Lamborghini, not just building it, right? I'm not only the mechanic, which is kind of the improvement person, like, oh, I want to optimize this engine. Sweet, optimize it, I don't need to drive it. I want to drive the car. So I think getting to a point where you enjoy the process of training and the fact that your body can do it is a very important part of the journey for everybody. Just finding some process-oriented goals. That said, I think some people are really just aligned with progress. I am one of them. I can't just enjoy the process. I do enjoy the process, don't get me wrong, and for certain things more than others. Like when I'm having a good day of snatches, and I haven't been doing Olympic lifting for a while, but man, just being able to do that movement, you feel fit, you feel capable, and that's a cool feeling. And it doesn't really matter whether I got 40 kilos on the bar or 80 kilos. That's a cool feeling. And I think that should be focused on to some degree. The fact that over the decades you have built competence and now you get to display competence should be something that you do enjoy. I think that is something that you want to work towards. So I think it goes from, you know, kind of this toxic societal comparison and I need acknowledgement and, you know, how much do you bench? Here's how much I bench, to I just want to improve and be a better version of myself. That's great. But then also I need to move finally towards enjoying the fact that I can be fit and display a body that is healthy and capable. And then the big one, of course, is can I take that out of the gym? And that's, you want to get to the point where you're that obnoxious asshole who tells other people that they just need to get up in the morning and try hard. You want to get to that point where that's, you could do that, but you choose not to because you didn't forget where you came from. Yeah. And you know that is actually the result of self-efficacy, not how you build it.
I built myself with just a small $1 million loan from my father. It's really no big deal when you think about it. Anyone has access to these resources. I just put in the work. I outwork people. Eric, man, so much to talk about. I will say very briefly about the person that we chide who claims they used to bench 405 back in high school. We make fun out of that person because secretly we fear we are that person. Because in our quietest, darkest, deepest moments of reflection, we think, is that us? Like our best moments? Is it potentially behind me? Like, is this it, basically? I will say that I find it very interesting, and we were speaking before about Rocky, the Rocky franchise, and we're going to bring it up here to find out which Rocky film are you, the listener. I will say very briefly that absolutely, I agree. Like I joke, I was memeing myself when I said that, like, I'm harder to kill, bro. But I think part of it is almost a reaction. It's an evolution. Like, so I could say for myself personally, liking the process right now and really focusing on it, has an element of stoicism where I'm not then directly attached to the outcome if it doesn't go my way. Not like this fearful avoidance, like it's not going to happen, bro. Like where you preclude the possibilities, so you're already like coloring the expectation, so to speak. But it's more that from doing this so many times, like there's like a 90% chance that everything's going to work out. There's also a 10% chance it's not going to. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. And as we approach closer, because a lot of those, trepidations that we have or anxiety where we get anxious, like, oh, we're going to hit this, like leading up to it, it doesn't serve anything at all. Like it's just, it clutters your mind, right? So it's extra space rather than just being present in the moment. I will say that for myself, it almost was a blessing. It's the natural evolution of things. Where for myself, one of the identities that I let go, and to your point, Eric, I think we evolve or we change over time. And it's not to say like we joke where it's like the pure comparison guy, like it kind of starts getting pathetic because guess what? It's a natural course of evolution that there will become a point if you're competing in said environment that you're going to age yourself out. So either you like grow the fuck up or you just start getting pathetic, where like that's where the guy like I used to bench for. They're trying to remind because they're so fragile that I used to be something, and that is their metric and measurement of success is not present moment because their present moment is sad as shit. It's their theoretical peak from 20 years ago. I'm like, my bad, bro. I didn't mean to bring this up. I do want to speak about also giving back after, but just to talk about the concept of being progress oriented and the process oriented. It's not that I abandoned focusing on strength or anything like that, is that it was tied to my identity where I liked being able to perform, like just that adrenaline, that sense of accomplishment, that efficacy, as you said, Eric. And I remember it was hampering a few different things when I was trying to lean down, actually, where I remember like my bench press progress, where it was going down like temporarily, and that's no big deal. But I always liked the idea that I could walk into a gym just myself, like on any given day, basically my performance could be pretty good. Rather than, man, there are different cycles here when it comes to your training throughout a year, throughout several years, where you're not that guy, pal. Like you're not always the individual squatting 500 pounds, where like your daily max might be then 400 pounds. And me being tied to being relatively as strong as my peak actually was detrimental to my long-term progress. And as soon as I started not giving up on that, but understanding the greater picture, it allowed me to lean down easier than I ever had. A bunch of other factors working with Eric, but that was certainly a factor. And then two, when it came time to revisit it, there almost becomes this reservoir if you haven't pursued a goal. And that's when I speak about genres, like you haven't heard that style in a while, you hear it again, and it sounds so refreshing rather than being in it for 30 years. Like, man, all I played was funk and nothing but the funk. It's like at some point, theoretically, once again, it gets stale. So always having strength on the mind, but not being quite there, it being detrimental to other goals. Instead of removing it, pursuing other paths, coming back to being reinvigorated, ascending to a new level, and then dancing away somewhere else. It's like, and that's for me personally. Go ahead.
Oh, I've got a bomb, and it's made of truth.
Oh no!
And I want to drop it. Is that okay?
Drop it.
All right. So the person who really just can't accept going down from their peak, and you've been there, I've been there, where, let's say we're focusing on body composition. So we're doing more hypertrophy training. We're trying to get leaner. So we're in a calorie deficit. We're not training specifically, but we cannot stand the fact that we can't squat X number or bench X number. That is actually an indication of a lack of self-efficacy. Yeah. That is an indication of fear, because you're basically saying, I'm not sure I can get back here. Maybe it was a fluke. It's imposter syndrome. I squatted 500 pounds, but I'm not a 500-pound squatter. And if I let go of this, I'm not sure I can get it back. That's really what's happening there. It's the same thing you see in competitors, typically first-time competitors or first couple times, where they get shredded and they have a really tough time letting go of it because that process was so hard, it was so challenging. And it seems like almost a fluke that I looked up one day and I was in stage condition. I can't let go of this. I can't get this back. Was this even me? Did I do this? Did I build this physique? Couldn't be. So I'm going to hold on to this for dear life. And then you get, hip injuries in the former example, or an eating disorder in the latter. So I have been there for both, literally. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think these days, it was not scary for me to hit that 500-pound squat that I did just recently for the first time in my life that I've been trying for since literally 2012, back when I squatted like in the 490s for the first time. You would think now, after almost a decade of work to just make 8 pounds of gain back on where I was back in the day, let's see, I hit 495 in like 2015 or 16. 5 years to put on as many pounds on my squat. You think I should be holding on with dear life, right? No, I'm not even squatting low bar right now. I got front squats in my last cycle. I had high bar squats. I think right now, if I tried to do a low bar squat max, it would probably be around 430. Oh my God, 70 pounds off my squat. The thing is now, because I have the self-efficacy, I know what the process is for me to get there. I know that if I decided to put in 4 to 6 months of work and I could avoid injury, which is a big if, don't get me wrong, there's still risk, but I don't think that it's impossible for me to get back there or higher if that is what I decide I want to do. And that's an example of not having that fear, which wasn't something I had for years. I would absolutely be the person, much like many of us were, who would hop between these strength and hypertrophy, or just try to do both at the same time programs while also dieting, because any element of the things you've achieved, you don't believe you can keep, so you got to hold on to them. So I can't take a deload because I've got to keep training, high volume, because I'll lose these gains because I didn't really get them. I'm an imposter. Most of the times you see people who they're asking questions that they already know the answer to. Well, I don't feel beat up, and do I really need a deload? Or, okay, I'm taking a diet break, but does that mean I should train harder? It's like, homie, you know what the right answer is, but you're afraid that what you got is not going to stick, or it's not real, or you're holding on for just, your barest dear life. But that's just bullshit in your head. That is just the product of fear. That's the product of not yet having confidence in your ability to attain what you have. And when you have that confidence and that self-efficacy that you can reattain it, it's easier to let it go because you're not actually letting go of it. You're just hitting pause. So anyway, bombs away.
No, Eric, this is one of the GOAT episodes. I'm just going to declare it. You're absolutely right. I think being perfectly transparent, the thing that racked me with doubt was that injury, the setback, where before everything was hunky-dory. It's like, who were we speaking with? What episode was it? When you're like an undefeated fighter, or maybe actually this was related to MMA, you have this confidence that of course you could achieve anything, because every single feedback you've been given in your experience has been one of victory. So you're infallible, right? Like, you can't be defeated. And it was not only the setback, but the length of the setback, and then the uncertainty when the path forward was so clear before. And then the idea too, the other thing that happened, which is the truth. We joked about this, you and myself, like, we're both strong. Like, if you compare it on a population average, it's like, but more people started entering, and I was on the precipice in that moment of, like, basically at that time, like when you joked about like 2012 nationals, there's like 2014 like nationals Canada. It's like, there was theoretically in 2014, like with the right tone and whatnot, like I could have represented Canada Worlds, which is wild to think, because there's no way now, like there's no way, right? So there's the environmental expectation of everyone leveling up, and then that FOMO being left behind, pursuing a certain thing, and then also to your own detriment, where you start making choices. Like, this is just a conversation also on being short-sighted, like short-sighted versus long-term, that in the end, some of the choices that I made in the moment that seemed right, and this is part of the process now of learning, and I could say I emerged better overall from it, negatively affected some of the outcomes, and then holding on to some of that trepidation and fear that was instilled by the first loss of confidence, and then just that length of time too, where it's like, man, I really don't know. And these are fundamental questions you then got to ask yourself. So it took, what's funny too is that sometimes, like, we're all very busy people, it's taking time for yourself. Like, when I took that break from YouTube, and that's what we're joking, like the first like shred down in 2019 took some effort, and then maintaining that leanness and pursuing other goals, and just basically being divorced from interacting with anyone about my goals. So they really were just my goals. Like, I could have like theoretically like disappeared and like, that's it. Like, hey, like I've never talked about my journey again. It restores then your own agency, because you're confirming to yourself that the conversation you're having is an insular one that needs to happen with yourself. Like, we have to have your own like come to Jesus moment, right? And I think there's some very powerful truths you can uncover. I want to say quickly before we tap into that Rocky story, which Rocky story everyone is on, I would add potentially another element, and I'm not saying it's the final situation, but in the end, we are all responsible for one another, where you progress, process, because you understand theoretically you can still make like 50s, 60s, 70s you can make progress in various areas. You just have to change it up. Like strength, like yeah, if Eric squatted 600 pounds at like 60 or 70, it ain't it. Like Dave Ricks is the outlier. So it is possible, and there's no shame at just focusing only on progress, let's say, as you continue to age, or even being process oriented. But I think a community focus too, like what you do, Eric, just think about like what we do with Iron Culture, like what you do in academia with sharing it, is that there is an element where you want to pass on, just because too, I think there are certain, it's almost like hacks, where I'm joking when I say this, but think about like video game secrets where you learn like you're playing like like Street Fighter, someone's helping you along the way, where the overall leveling up that occurs is like, if it took us 5 years and what we describe to someone can help them only achieve it in 2 years, then why the hell not? And there is a certain reward, and I think that is growth, like just a idea of, you know, empathy, compassion of someone else, like seeing you succeed makes me happy, like makes me gives me a sense of fulfillment, and then an understanding that it's not just about me. And that's kind of the overall arc, the growth of a human, where it's like it's just about me, like the I world, if narcissism were that, like me versus everyone else, right? And that's like, unfortunately, I will say this, I think they're some of the loudest voices, Eric, because people piece themselves out before they kind of mature on that journey, the journey of self. And that is why you hear them often the loudest, because it's like the most visceral, the most almost emotional response, where from a marketing, and as you said, marketing is basically pulling on strings that already exist, that they're easy to do. Like, think about this, like, how would you market it? So like, be community focused, like give back to you, right? Like it just sounds tacky AF. But they're often the loudest voices, because they're like the reptilian truths that we hold, that like are basically our starting points, where we're just like, this is us, like we must conquer. I'm like, okay guys, like oh the lion died now, oh really, oh paleo ancestors. So I think there's numerous before we get on to the Rocky conversation, we talk about how we're based in Rocky 3. I find it interesting that there's many trapdoors, man, in fitness, that if you don't have this, you don't get to experience self-actualization. You could fall down these rabbit holes and like almost never emerge, if that makes sense. Where basically it's like what's that game, like the shifting cards or whatnot, where it's like a magic trick where you think you're on to the next thing, but you're really just within the same cycle. Just
the Matrix. Yeah. I don't know, man.
I was thinking like, what's the one, you know, with like the cups where it's always like,
3-card Monty.
3-card Monty, you said.
I think the 3-card Monty.
Yeah, yeah. You think it's a new game, but it's the same shit over and over again, and you're falling for the rabbit hole of you're trying to pursue. Like you're always trying to pursue something. Like, I am now. Wait a second. I wasn't an alpha male. Now I'm a sigma male, or like whatever. Insert like, you know, whatever. Insert. It's a new goal, but it's the same. It's the emperor with the same clothes. Really, when you examine it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think yeah. What we're talking about here is like the whole goal. I mean, at a certain point, and maybe the reason why we do Iron Culture is you're hopefully trying to let the ladder down, right? So that other people don't have to like think they're climbing a ladder and they find out it's actually like a rope to nothing, or it's actually going down, or you get to the top and you just get kicked off or whatever, you know, like. So yeah, like you said, there's a trap door at the bottom, etc. We're trying to get people to not play 3-card Monty, essentially, right?
We've never gambled, Eric. That's why I was like, what is it called? Like, you know, the thing there's always in movies. It's like 3 things.
It's the con game where they're moving around and you're trying to find the
whatever it is,
find the lady, you know. Yeah, but they always move. It's not where you think it is, so it's just taking your money.
Yep.
But yeah, obviously we don't know what the hell we're talking about, but it's an analogy that stands.
It's now part of canon, Iron Culture canon.
Canon, done. So really, I think, you know, we brought up Rocky. Rocky's perfect because it is showing you the different phases, pitfalls, and processes of actually coming back. And it is just perfect that it is, of course, from one of the Iron Game, you know, culture heroes. So Rocky 1 and 2 is all about actually building self-efficacy, right? So this guy who's down and out, he's an up-and-coming kind of like locally good fighter, and he gets a shot, and he goes every round barely losing with the best boxer in the world. So he builds that self-efficacy, and he thinks he's there. Rocky 2 we're in now. But it doesn't come easy. Like he thinks he's expecting, you know, being able, you know, getting to that point to be the ticket to salvation. It's not. And instead, he's got to, you know, keep working hard and do it again, right? So this is that idea of, you know, you see a pitfall and you go, no, I have to stay consistent and keep working. But this time, he beats Apollo Creed in the last round. He gets those small incremental gains. He gets better, and he also starts to build community now. So him and Apollo Creed become friends. Now here's the problem. He becomes one of those loud ass voices who forgets where they came from at the end of in parts of Rocky 2, but primarily in Rocky 3, where he's just kind of resting on his laurels, not training as much, enjoying celebrity status, and he gets his ass whipped by Mr. T, another amazing Iron Game member. He has no pity for the fool. He loses, I think, in like the second or third round, if I recall correctly, and he has to regain his roots and understand where he came from. And this time, with the help of Apollo Creed, comes back and beats Clubber Lang, right? So at this point now, we have what we think is the fully actualized, Iron Gamer, right? He's been able to make progress, build self-efficacy. He lost a little bit of that, got too much on the improvement train, lost touch with maybe other people. And then now he's like, oh, okay, hey, no, I get it. I have to keep that grind alive. It's not just about the outcome, but the journey. And now he's created some community. He's got friends and family, okay? And he loses it all in Rocky 4 to some degree, okay? So Apollo, his best friend, killed by Vlad, okay? Yeah. Dies in the ring, and now he's facing a true existential threat. His own, life is at stake because he's going to go fight this guy for a different reason. Now it's not about him. It's about avenging his friend, and in kind of a gross Cold War era, community style oriented story, he's doing it for America. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that aspect of Rocky 4. However, I think the point is that he's doing it for a bigger purpose than himself, even if that purpose is nationalism. I think the point is that America. It's for a bigger reason now, right? So now he's doing it. It means something to his friends and family because of the loss of Apollo. He is facing an existential threat, and he is on his own, but he knows he can do it. He can train with chopping wood in the snow if he needs to, pulling a sled, okay, while they got the Russian sports science just making it perfect for Vlad, which is basically the opposite of the economic situation of the U.S. and Soviet Union at that point in 1985. But anyway, and he emerges victorious. However, there's a cost. Now we get into Rocky 5. He suffered significant brain damage. So he can no longer be at his peak. And he cashes in his chips and says, you know what? I want to bring the ladder down. I want to coach the next generation. I want to help them. But unfortunately, Tommy Gunn, the one he coaches, now has to go through that same process of forgetting where he came from. He ends up betraying and not giving the respect due to Rocky for helping him. And then in Rocky's final bare knuckles outside of the ring fight, he overcomes Tommy, humbling him, hopefully, punching some sense into him so that he can move forward, but also proving to himself that he's still got it. And I think the next one, which is actually just titled Rocky Again, where he comes out of retirement 20 years later and goes, you know what, I still got fight left in me. Maybe I wasn't at my peak. I took enough time off, some of this brain damage healed, and does an exhibition fight and proves to himself, most importantly, this isn't for Adrian, this isn't for anyone else, it's for him at this point, that he's still got it. And then from then on, it's all about Creed. It's about him helping the next generation to learn from his mistakes and, helping the son of his deceased best friend walk the same path. And essentially, that's where we're at, folks. And you are somewhere along that pathway as an Iron Cult member, and you can see the parallels. They're pretty obvious. And you just want to make sure that you don't get stuck in Rocky 5 and that you do actually get to that point with Creed, where you're helping the next generation.
Eric.
And you don't lose touch with your son. That's an important part, too. Right. Be a good father.
Yeah. Eric, that was beautiful, man. In film theory, film history, people analyze different things, like Ingmar Bergman, the loss of faith, humans, Tarkovsky, like the passage of time and our spiritual self in a material world. Us here at the Iron Cult, it is the most thorough analysis of Rocky that probably anyone has committed. We tell Stallone basically what you just said. And he's like, I never thought about it that deeply. It's like, you're shit. He's like, you're right. There actually is something here. Now, there's a saccharine element, as you said, like the like Rocky Four, like we're joking about that. I could only hope on our own journey, because the question we're going to ask at the cult is, where do you fall on the Rocky journey towards like kind of self-realization, self-actualization? I only hope that either I don't have to die or you don't have to die in Rocky Four, because I think we're both in like Rocky Three. Like we've achieved. What were you joking with Chad Landers? You said we're in our post-relevant phase now. We're basically
post-relevance phase. Yes,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
yeah. You know where it's like we're not the old dudes at the gym, like nuts out in the change room, not really caring about anything, just wanting to hang out.
It's not Rocky 5 yet.
Yeah, we're not
Thank
Rocky
God.
5 yet.
Yeah.
But so like we've achieved success, where we've become notable in the community, and the question that Survivor asked that we need to answer, Eye of the Tiger, we traded our passion for glory. It's like, is that where we're at now? Like, is this the limit? Like, is that a period to some of the absolute levels of progress we will make when it comes to hypertrophy, conditioning, strength? Like, these are questions yet to be answered. And sometimes it's the next generation, or sometimes it's the help of a friend. Shout out to, maybe for myself, like the nipples here in person, like training together to overcome to a new height. I don't know who our theoretical Clubber Lang would be. I do want to say, because I thought that was excellent, Eric, that I personally was always more of a Karate Kid individual. Like, you see the bandana.
Ooh.
I enrolled in karate Hapkido when I was like 5 years old. I got so mad. So we got a beautiful olive skinned lad from a rough neighborhood, trying to habituate himself to a new environment that he doesn't quite fit in, and all he needs is...
Are you Daniel's son? Is that what you're telling me?
All he needs, Eric, is the right figure, elderly figure, to guide him, because he has all these ambitions, all these goals in life, but he's like a wild, untamed, chaotic energy. And so it takes someone who's been through the ringer of life, experienced everything that seemingly in society everyone thinks is one person, or they just view him a certain way, like a caricature of himself, but he's actually a beautiful human that helps Daniel's son realize who he is. And it comes to that seminal moment where he thinks he's done. Like, I'm not even, Eric, this is not even a joke. Before I slammed 600 pounds, that deadlift, I did watch, because I remember how impressionable it was for me as a kid. It's the same director. We've discovered, I verified it, I thought it was the director one who did Karate Kid. I think in terms of emotional highs, the very end where he fucking crane kicks him in the face, he looks, the music, da-na-na, like that the actual like melodic pitch right there of Mr. Miyagi, he looks over and he gives him just the knowing nod of a mentor, that this is like your moment, this is everything. He thinks he's done, his leg is injured. The All-State Valley Karate Tournament, which is the most serious local event to ever take place in karate history, he comes back injured, ready with this fabled move. This guy who seems, unbeatable, he throws the crane kick, and then it's over. Oh, what a high there, Eric. That's the moment. I will say, I do wonder with everyone where they personally feel they fall on the Rocky journey, because part of Rocky 1, I'll just say briefly, is that he's still developing that self-efficacy, to your point, where he's racked with doubt. Like, basically all of 1 is he, so he's even at a point, what's interesting to him, like let's say Rocky, the character, he's probably like almost 30. He's questioning, can he even achieve anything, or his best days behind him? And that's just the start of the journey. And then he achieves a certain level. In order to go in level 2 to beat Apollo Creed, he needs to take it to, so he's almost unlocking new levels in every single Rocky. And to your point, in 3, it's not like he becomes stronger, it's he becomes savvier. And that's something that we were speaking about very briefly. I think you were mentioning, just like Jeff Albers.
That's actually a really good point. So yeah, in Rocky 3, he tries to fight a more physically dominant opponent with his standard, I'm going to let you punch me in the face style, and then I'm going to hit you back harder. Right. Very, very real boxing choreography in these movies. And then he learns that he might actually have to learn how to box to beat Clubber Lang, and that's how he beats him. He becomes more savvy. So anyway, go ahead.
No, and that's all of our journeys. And I do think that's a wonderful element. One, because there's a wide variety of different goals that we could pursue if we're talking about progress. But also, it's how we're pursuing it, where we think, once again, like, no one really knows what's going on, like what's going to happen in our journey. I can say that very briefly, that for myself, when we talk about like learning how to box, is like one of the things that happened recently was like learning to let go of maintaining a certain level of strength when it's not important, it's not helpful in any context to my very present goals over the next 6 to 8 months. And really, me holding on to this thing, like just like holding on to it, is holding me back from something else. So I do think some re-examinations where you think you're doing everything you can, or you think it's like the right combination, can oftentimes change things up. When we're talking about a small incremental gain, can make a difference.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. I don't have much to add to that except for the fact that our Karate Kid references here is actually a hint at a future episode that is coming and a guest we'll have who has specific experience in this domain. We'll leave it there, folks.
No.
And you can find out when we have that person on in the future.
Eric, do you think we've like addressed our own existential crisis? Like, are we good? Like, you know, emotionally though, like spiritually, are we right now in a sunken place? Like, what's going on?
No, I feel like I've said enough BS in this episode that whether I
Believe it or not.
pursue something completely different or, like make some huge concession ethically and moving forward, or just completely stop lifting, I can point to this episode and have some rationalization that will make me feel good about myself despite making a terrible decision.
Yeah, in a very absolute sense, it's like you're looking worse and worse. The numbers are going down, but we're able just to rationalize it. It felt like, Eric, that's the thing, man. Hey, we're giving back to the community. Reviews are just coming in. They're all 1-star. It's like, please shut down Iron Culture. It's just irrelevant, right? Like, people are just like, I don't know why they're still doing this. Like, man, we have this voracious just audience that is listening to us, the worst of all possible worlds. And that was funny because I do think like Jeff is a similar age to me, where we were joking about that to each other because he's busy with something and we've been trying. He's been back basically for 6 weeks and we haven't trained together. It is like maybe like an 80-90 minute journey, so it's like it's close but like not like super close.
Yeah.
But we were just joking to one another. We're like, that was our goals, where it's like, yeah, he was getting stronger. Now we're focusing on like hypertrophy, but now we're just focusing in this next little bit on just like happiness, bro. Like just taking care of yourself, because hey, like you got life goals and you got to get those.
Self-care.
Yeah, we said that. It's like, and then that's just gonna fall into. And then he sent me a photo of himself, like we're just joking, or we're supposed to train, didn't train. And I said, I'm finally making it to the gym. And he sent a photo from himself on the floor. And he said, I haven't made it to the gym yet, bro. I was like, oh shit. Like this is the level we've reached.
You know you've done it when you can either say going to the gym is self-care or deciding to skip the gym is self-care.
Right, yeah.
Really, no matter what you do is self-care, that's when you've ascended.
Yeah. Your perspective is all that matters, man. Eric, I think this is a phenomenal episode. Is there anything that you want to add before we wrap it up? We gave the Rocky analogy. We did it. Okay.
Nah, man. I mean, people can tell that a lot of research went into this episode. I had a couple of different windows open on my tabs. One, I had those studies we referenced in the beginning about contextual interference and cognitively demanding tasks. And I also had the Rocky franchise Wikipedia open. So if people don't respect that level of research that goes into these episodes, then I have nothing more to add. Then there is no pleasing you.
Eric, what does it state about you that I feel quite confident you would be able to riff on the research, but verifying Rocky's information, you needed to have that window open? Like the research, you were just like trying to verify, Zordos and colleagues, right? No, that's what I thought. Whereas Rocky, you're like, he didn't direct it? Like, what is going on? Your priorities are all out of whack, man.
Yeah, some of them he wrote and directed, but some of them he just wrote. Like I think Rocky 1 and 5 he just wrote. I didn't know that. So yeah, I think that basically tells you that if you want to be me, if you want to pursue,
you can't, because it's a
broad knowledge set in physique and sports science, you sacrifice things like basic knowledge of films, life experiences, knowing how to ride a bike, general competence in social situations. And it's worth it because, hey, I can squat a decent amount.
Hey, the undercurrent I was going to say, really, of what we're talking about when we're speaking about Rocky, man, is Sly got on that good. You know what I mean? Like Rocky 1, au naturel. 2, definitely au naturel. 3, starting getting questionable. 4, definitely looking pretty juicy. And by the time Rocky Balboa number 6 comes on, what needs to be said?
Well, I mean, let's just say that he was training with the Pumping Iron crew in the 80s. So
yeah.
Take that for what it's worth.
Good cocktails, man. Good cocktails. Hey,
That's right.
I will wrap it up by saying thank you for another fantastic duo. Always excited, my man, to do these. Moving forward in the future together, hands clasped in that darkness. Shout out to Mike T, where he's like that. This is the thing that you've learned. You don't even need a map because the map is in your heart. So that's what you got to do when you're inside that cave at the end of the day. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. You can go ahead and leave a rating or review, as we already asked you. We are trying to fight the corporate overlords by playing their game to outplay their game. Any rating review will do. It should be 5 stars. We are looking to deny another big company from getting their tentacles on us. So if you know a big company that is looking to pay people, don't send them our way. Let's keep this public access. Shall you do it for the damn passion? And then we find out the check that we actually have been missing out on. I'm like, Eric, we need to talk. Wait a second here. You can monetize.
Yeah, I mean, pass those folks on our way.
Yeah,
just so we can say no. Most likely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, that's what I respect about Rogan. He's like he's part of the resistance. He's part of the $100 million Spotify deal resistance. Like, surely that doesn't have any implications in terms of what he can or can't say, or like, all those sorts of things. But I appreciate that he's standing up for free speech for all of us.
Nothing to add.
Yeah, we'll catch everyone every single Monday. We'll see you in the next one.